Welcome to Morning Coffee. Today's morning coffee is going to be a little bit different. Today's morning coffee is going to specifically be about the Diddy trial. So if you don't already know, the jury is officially deliberating. So the trial ended last week after closing arguments were done. The prosecution team did their closing arguments, I believe, on Thursday, and then the defense team did their closing arguments on Wednesday. On Friday. So the jury is officially deliberating starting today, and they've been given instructions on how to deliberate and what they should be considering, which I'm going to share with you all in a minute. But I want to start with high-level overview of the closing arguments from both sides and what they chose to focus on in their closing arguments because, yeah. I'll start with the prosecution team. So the prosecution team really took the avenue of clarifying for the jurors that they needed to focus on being able to show at least two or to be the predicates for the crime. So what they need in order to find him guilty of the crime. So they're saying, remember, he's running a criminal enterprise. So they're saying Diddy allegedly led a violent, coercive operation involving sex trafficking, drug dealing, and orchestrated freak-offs, drug-fueled sex parties featuring escorts. Now, they also shared in their closing argument that though they're trying to say that he was not a drug dealer, that he had drugs for his own personal use, distribution of drugs is giving drugs to one person. So even if you distributed it to one person, then that's technically drug deal or dealing drugs. Their headline was "No means no." So they are very much honing in on this idea that no means no because they're talking about Cassie and Jane. Although they may have said yes to freak-offs in the past, and although they may have been willing participants in some of the sex parties, they're still allowed to say no. And they did say no, and the prosecution team is telling us that they showed clear evidence that they've said no at some point, and he still forced or coerced them into participating into these sex acts. And they got as graphic as to say that they were dealing with UTIs and nipple infections, and they were still forced to perform during these freak-offs, even though they were in pain, and they were forced to do it for hours on end, days on end. And that's not a willing participant, that's abuse, which to me is true. They also wanted to clarify the racketeering framework. So they wanted to make sure that people understood that racketeering, meaning organized crime within an enterprise, that his assistants and bodyguards were participants in these organized crimes. So an example of that was when, I forgot the name of his chief of staff, but when he offered the security from the hotel incident with Cassie, where the tape was leaked, he bribed them with $100,000. They brought up the fact that his chief of staff and his bodyguard were there to try to help to bribe the security officers by paying them money in order to get them not to release the tape or get rid of the tape. And they showed that by the chief of staff contacting the hotel security and asking him not to release it and telling him why, organizing him coming up to Diddy's penthouse where they saw money counters and the bodyguards walked him upstairs, telling him that he was doing the right thing, and them giving the $100,000 after putting it through a counter in order for him not to release the tape. So those are just some of the crimes that they're showing. They're like, that's just some of them. But they also arrange parties that they say are illegal. And the reason that the parties are illegal is not because they're sex parties, but because they crossed state lines with male escorts in order to have them participate in prostitution, which the defense team is arguing, but we'll talk about that in a second. And the prosecution team just wanted to simplify for the jury how easy it is for them to make the case on any of the charges that were found against Diddy. So they basically spent time saying you only need two crimes in order to convict him or to find him guilty of trafficking and of racketeering. So racketeering only requires two organized crimes within a span of 10 years. So they basically went through the ways that they can clearly articulate that he was participating in organized crime, and you only need two. For sex trafficking, you only really need to find one instance. And they were saying that they've clearly articulated that. Now, the defense team had a different take on it. Obviously, the defense team is Diddy's team. They're arguing that Diddy is a freaky frog, that he's a swinger and he's into the lifestyle, and that he's abusive. They're making it very clear that they're not trying to say that he was not an abuser, but they're saying he's not guilty of the crimes that are being presented in front of him. So they're saying that although he was a swinger, it was all consensual. They try to paint a picture of Cassie and Jane being willing participants and showing evidence of them participating willingly in some of the freak-offs. They said that they also tried to bring up a money grab. So they were basically saying that Cassie was in this for a money grab and that she's the real winner. So that's important because the reason that they're saying that Cassie is the winner in this instance is because they're saying she walked away with $30 million. If you recall, she got $20 million in a settlement from Diddy when she was first about to put the lawsuit out there. And instead of allowing her to put the lawsuit out there, Diddy settled in less than 24 hours. She also got a $10 million settlement from the hotel for the incident that happened at the hotel and what happened with the camera footage. So the defense team is saying that she's the real winner in this and she walked away with $30 million. They're also saying that this was all a money grab on Cassie and Jane's behalf, and that they just simply wanted to make Diddy pay, right? And they're saying that this was all a domestic violence incident that New York decided to investigate and to dig themselves into because Cassie filed the lawsuit, and that they don't feel like there's anything really there. They said that this really should have been a domestic violence case, but they brought up the fact that Diddy did not, or that Cassie and Jane both did not go the domestic violence route. Instead, they took money from him. The defense also said that the one incident where Jane talked about violence in the situation, they said that Jane was the one that ignited the violence between the two of them because she did share that she had kicked him in the head and that she threw candles at him, and that they believe that that was just them having an argument and that they figured it out later. They also brought up the fact that Jane's baby father is someone famous who we're not going to talk about in this video for the sake of the anonymity that she was given, but they bring up the fact that her baby father is a celebrity and that she was used to a lifestyle and that she wanted to continue the lifestyle. They also brought up the fact that Jane said that she participated in a freak-off with a really well-known rapper who people have speculated is Kanye West, and that this was just a part of who she was. And they're saying that this is simply a money grab, and this is not a conspiracy to commit crimes, but instead, this is just a man who was participating in freak-offs and using drugs for his own personal use. Now, they said that the only thing that really came out of this whole thing was that when they did the raid on Diddy's house, which the defense team is saying is unnecessary, they found a bunch of baby oil and Astroglide. And he basically tried to make a play on whether or not Astroglide was illegal and like what's wrong with using Astroglide. So they're basically saying that the prosecution team was out to get this black man who is a well-known black man, and they made this case simply because they wanted to find reason to blame him for something because Cassie filed the lawsuit. So the ice cream truck is passing by in my hood. It's summertime, y'all. It's officially summertime. So those are the two closing arguments. And then the prosecution team also had the chance to have a rebuttal to the defense team, in which they said that clearly they're trying to downplay what's happening with Cassie and Jane. And also, I think what was a very good point and what continues to be a good point is that the defense team is saying that this is all a money grab by Cassie and Jane, but they've already grabbed the money. I just want to clarify that. I feel like that's a weak argument because Cassie was given the money before the trial. Her getting on the stand does not mean that she's going to get a payout. And Jane has already gotten, I think she tried to get a settlement, but she didn't do a settlement. He just gave her $100,000. was already paid, and he is paying for Jane's lawyers and for her rent or for her to live. And that's already happening without them testifying. So I feel like this idea that it's a money grab is a weak argument because they've already gotten the money. They didn't need to testify to get the money. And that's what the prosecution team is saying. They're basically saying that the defense team is trying to downplay what's happening here, and that we did know that they testified, but they already got the money, and the defense team is trying to downplay it because they want to make it seem like no real crimes were committed. I don't know that I feel like, and you also have to remember that the closing statements are not evidence. It's just their way of tying all the evidence together and persuading the jury one way or the other. Now, the jury has to now turn around, go back and deliberate on whether or not they believe that he's guilty based on not only the charges brought against him and the testimony and the evidence, but based on the instructions and how each of the charges are defined. I personally think that if the requirements for racketeering are 2 organized crimes within a span of 10 years, he's cooked, because an organized crime is as simple as everyone coming together to transport these male escorts across state lines for the sake of prostitution. That's enough. You know what I'm saying? You don't need much more than that, because he's done both of those. He's done that. Now, the defense team is saying that he did not bring the male escorts across state lines for the sake of prostitution, but then that instead he was paying them for their time and their discretion, but not for sex. But they showed text messages between Diddy and one of the escort service companies where they were saying that he owed one of the workers $600, and Diddy's response to that was, he's lucky he got anything. He wasn't even able to perform. So if you were just trying to bring them across state lines for their time or you're just paying them for their time and their discretion, why are you talking to a male escort service and telling them that the escort couldn't perform? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So that in and of itself is a crime. And and it wasn't just one male escort. It was several of them that he's brought across state lines. And that's not even including Cassie and Jane. And to be quite frank, the bribery in and of itself also crime. He paid them to get rid of, and then he had them sign an NDA. He bribed them to get rid of the tape because he didn't want it to get out there. There's so many ways. Even when when the assistant said that he showed up at the diner trying to find Suge Knight, and he showed up with guns and things like that. Now they're arguing that Capricorn Clark's argument about her getting kidnapped is not true, although it sounds like she was forced to go with him to Kid Cudi's house. But they're not using arson in the case anymore because the prosecution team decided to strike that from the what the jury needs to look at in order to convict him. And I think it's because they can't show that Diddy was the one that in fact set the car on fire. But even showing up to Kid Cudi's home with Capricorn Clark and his bodyguard and having a weapon on him because of his jealousy. Now, the defense team is saying that there's no evidence that he showed up there, and that he's just a boyfriend that was in jealous rage. But to me, it's like there's enough there for them to make a case for at least 2 organized crimes and for sex trafficking, which is engaging in sex while bringing escorts or whatever across state lines. So that's that. Now, here's the jury instructions that were given to them by the judge today. I'm going to read to you specifically what TMZ released about the beginning of deliberation. Although they are saying deliberation was halted just now, and I'll tell y'all about that in a second. But before we get to that, let's talk about what the judge said to them before they began deliberation. So it says the jury's in the federal criminal trial of Sean Diddy Combs in NYC is now deliberating after receiving instructions from Judge Subramanian, I can't ever say his name, for more than an hour on Monday morning. After the jury of 8 men and 4 women was seated, the judge went through each of the charges as the gallery looked on, telling jurors actions may speak louder than words. The judge told the jurors they should decide for themselves how credible they found each witness. The evidence is the testimony. He said, while reminding the jurors to take note of the acts everyone they considered to be participant in the events presented. Now, Diddy is charged with racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of sex trafficking, and 2 counts of transporting to engage in prostitution. He pled not guilty to all charges. After 7 weeks of testimony, including ex-girlfriends, former employees, the defense and the prosecution teams rested their case on Friday. Diddy declined to testify. So that's important. Remember, he chose not to testify. He could have, and he said he was not going to. And the defense team did not call any witnesses after closely cross-examining each of the prosecution's witnesses. The judge told the jury that witnesses who are given immunity should be examined with greater care than ordinary witnesses. He also noted that certain witnesses were permitted to be identified by pseudonyms, referring to Jane and Mia, and that should bear on your evaluation of credibility. Judge Subramanian pointed out the defendant had no responsibility to testify, and he did not. You must not attach any significance to that. So he told them that they can't use the fact that Diddy didn't testify to decide whether he's guilty or not. The judge also addressed related activities brought up in the trial, including arson, bribery, witness tampering, and distribution of narcotics. And he noted charts and summaries won't be available in the jury room, though each juror will have a copy of the judge's instructions with them. The judge told them your verdict must be unanimous, and said that they must not read any news reports about the trial, and thank them for their service. So they deliberated. Those are the instructions from the judge. But now I'm seeing that something new happened. So it says the Diddy trial jury notes halts deliberation. Juror 25 cannot follow judge's instructions. Oh, let's see what that's about. There's already been a dramatic development as the jury began deliberating in Diddy's federal criminal trial in New York City. A note was sent by the jury to the judge in the courtroom within 2 hours of them deliberating. Judge Subramanian announced at about 1:15 p.m., "We have received a note from the jury." He said the note from the jury foreperson reads, "We have juror 25, who we believe cannot follow your honor's instructions, and the foreperson wanted to meet with the judge about it." Diddy and his lawyers were huddled in the courtroom at the announcement. Diddy defense attorney Mark Agnifilo suggested telling the jury it is still early in the process. They're just getting started. Prosecution attorney Comey said they suggest instructing the jurors, "It's important not to include any information about what's going on in the jury room." The judge instructed both sides to confer upon a response. About 30 minutes later, the judge sent a note back to the jury. He reminded the jury of their duty and obligation to follow his instructions on the law. He told the jury to continue to deliberate. It's unclear whether a juror unable to follow the judge's instruction is favorable for the defense or the prosecution. So we know that juror 25 is a 51-year-old gay white man with a PhD in molecular biology. So as of right now, there's some issues with the jurors following the judge's instructions. I think that that's a sign that there's going to be some sort of hung jury or maybe a mistrial, but I already knew where this was going. But y'all let me know if y'all think Diddy is going to be found guilty or not guilty. Verdict coming soon, hopefully within the next few days, unless there's something else going on. So y'all let me know what y'all think. That's the latest on the Diddy trial. We're literally right around the corner from a verdict.